Have you ever heard the saying, your thoughts shape your words, words turn into actions, actions become habits, habits define your character, and your character shapes your destiny? Simply put, what you think can decide where you end up in life. It might sound deep, but it's a straightforward concept. Your thoughts influence how you live. By the time you realize this, it could be too late. This is the story I want to share today. I'm Rebecca, 54 years old, working part-time as a homemaker. Married for 30 years, our 2 kids are grown, and my husband and I enjoy our days together as a couple. Retirement is approaching. I mentioned this over dinner to my husband, who's 3 years older than me and will retire in 3 years. He's been a banker for about 35 years since college. In the past, it was common to use the retirement bonus to pay off the mortgage and plan for post-retirement life. Paying off the mortgage at once with a lump sum was the norm. But times have changed. Oh, really? My husband explained that only a handful of companies offer retirement bonuses in the hundreds of thousands, and getting tens of thousands is considered good. Besides, there's the challenge of needing $200,000 for retirement, and more households prefer keeping as much cash as possible. I was quite intrigued by my husband's banker-like perspective. Regarding our house, what if we pay off a chunk to save on interest? We can then manage the remaining loan with our reduced living expenses. Fortunately, I can work as a contract employee even after retiring. It's comforting to have a financially savvy husband. You're reliable. I complimented him while pouring a glass of wine. One day, some unexpected guests arrived at our house. "Hey, Rebecca, it's been a while," greeted my 6-year-old brother and his wife, Annabelle. I must have made a face upon seeing them. They weren't pleasant people, but I kept my thoughts to myself. "Why are you here in the middle of the day on a weekday?" I inquired. Annabelle promptly replied, "Well, we just built a new house, and we thought of getting a congratulatory gift." A congratulatory gift? It felt rather impolite to come seeking gifts, and I'm sure many would agree. However, these individuals considered it normal, posing a problem. Reflecting on it, they've been money-focused since their marriage. Back when they got married, I was still in college, and my brother shamelessly said, "You're over 20 now, so you're an adult. Give us a gift, whether you're earning or not. Going to college as a woman is a waste. Use that tuition money for our gift instead." Even my parents were astonished by my brother's greed. I thought no one could be more greedy than him, but it turned out Annabelle was equally miserly. They talk about money all the time, even during Christmas and New Year's. "Rebecca, how much do you make? What's your husband's bonus? What assets does your family have? How much is your father getting in pension?" Annabelle inquired. There's a recent popular web service that analyzes people's brains just by entering their names, and I can imagine if they used it, the word money would dominate. Dealing with such vulgar and uncivilized people is something I only endure when necessary, and yet, here they are, expecting a congratulatory gift for their new house. Wait, a new house? I learned that my brother retired at 60 this year. Annabelle seems to be working part-time. But, well, this might sound odd. But did you secure a proper loan for your new house? When I inquired, my brother responded, "Loan? Not at all. I bought this house with my retirement money and the inheritance from her parents." It turns out my brother used his $80,000 retirement funds, $140,000 in savings, and his sister-in-law's parents' $250,000 inheritance to purchase a house. I've been in a rental for a long time, and I wanted to experience living in a house. A new house is definitely nice. Indeed, it's really nice. Much cleaner than this old house. It's barrier-free, and will be secure in our old age. However, I'm concerned about such a risky move. But you still have 5 years until you start receiving your pension. Don't you think it would be better to have some savings for your old age? When I mentioned that, my sister-in-law shot me a contemptuous look. "You're such a worrywart. We've thought about those things." At that moment, my brother and his wife exchanged a creepy smile as they leaned in close to each other. What are they plotting? I discovered their scheme a month later. Rebecca, your dad collapsed. I got that call from my mother during my lunch break at work. My father was perfectly fine when I spoke to him a week ago. Why did this happen? I informed my workplace and immediately rushed to the hospital. Upon arrival, my husband was already there, offering comfort to my haggard and slouched-shouldered mother. "How's Dad doing?" I inquired, prompting my husband to explain that instead of my mother, my father had collapsed in the bathroom and was rushed unconscious to the hospital. He had been diagnosed with a subarachnoid hemorrhage, undergoing immediate surgery and still undergoing treatment. I see. Did you inform my brothers? Yes, I did, but they mentioned discussing the inheritance before visiting his bedside. So, rather than coming to the hospital, they chose to consult with a lawyer at the law firm. How money-focused can those insensitive couples be? My father is still alive, albeit in critical condition, with a chance of the worst outcome, but it seems inhumane to prioritize sorting out finances while he's still fighting. I'm at a loss for words. Even my mother wears a resigned expression towards their behavior. Honestly, I'm appalled. What kind of heartless individuals are they? The surgery on my father was successful. However, his elderly condition remained precarious, and making predictions seemed impossible. While my mother and I took turns visiting, my brother and his wife were nowhere to be found. Then, a week after the surgery, we received a call from the hospital. Your father's condition has suddenly changed. My husband, mother, and I rushed to the hospital, only to find my brother and his wife surprisingly already there. You arrived early. I commented to my brother, who oddly wore a cheerful expression. Well, why would he look so happy when our parent is in critical condition? The reason became apparent quickly. Hey, what about your father's life insurance? Can you ask your mother about it? My sister-in-law whispered audibly in the hushed hospital room. I shot her a glare, but she appeared genuinely puzzled, saying, "What's wrong?" That foolish expression of hers only fueled my anger. Then the doctor entered the room to check on my father. I believe today is the turning point. The doctor informed us with a serious expression, and my husband, mother, and I broke down in tears. Memories of my father flashed through my mind in an instant. My mother was in the same state, holding my father's hand and calling out to him with a tearful voice. Oh, but we finally get it. Yeah, now our retirement is secure. I overheard my brother and his wife conversing as we mourned. They seemed eagerly anticipating my father's passing. I recalled what they had said earlier. Their focus was on their retirement, connecting it to my father's inheritance, the new house they built by depleting their savings, the matters with the law firm, and this callous statement. My mother seemed to grasp their intentions and shot a sudden look at my brother and his wife. They had a hyena-like appearance, fixated on their prey and eagerly awaiting its demise. People often say that when anger peaks, it transforms into an unusual calmness, and that proved true. My mother appeared to share the same sentiments, and after silently observing my brother and his wife, she suggested, "Let's step outside for a moment." We exited the hospital room and settled into a discussion in the hospital's lounge. You two really have no idea, my mother stated with a mix of disbelief and perhaps pity as she looked at them. What do you mean? My sister-in-law noticed the shift in my mother's demeanor, her expression suddenly stiffening. My brother maintained a relaxed look, but I wondered if it was only a matter of time. My mother continued, "There's no inheritance for you two to claim." What? What do you mean, Mom? My brother's expression abruptly tensed. There's nothing to inherit. The house and land we live on are in my name, and your father has no assets. Come to think of it, I've heard this before. My father was the type who didn't hoard money. He had a habit of spending all he had, and my mother handled all the household finances. The only money my father possessed was for his daily cigarette expenses. Aside from a vague understanding of money, he was a good husband and father. So my mother and father managed quite well together. In reality, my father had no significant assets, and if anything, he only had a few dollars for his cigarette expenses in the coin purse he always carried. But he has life insurance, right? Yes, but I am the beneficiary. It's none of your concern. My mother sharply replied. Your father is still alive, and this couple is only thinking about money, bringing up life insurance. As I was about to voice my frustration, my mother intervened. Firstly, your father is not someone who would succumb to something like this. He stayed calm during a motorcycle accident, when caught in an avalanche while skiing, and even when he was ill. He has overcome cancer and liver cirrhosis with sheer willpower. If you're concerned about inheritance, shouldn't you be more focused on your own spouse than your stepfather? My mother chuckled while addressing my sister-in-law, and my brother was the one expressing his frustration. Mom, I'm still alive. Don't talk about inheritance. It's inappropriate. It's rude. Their annoyance was likely because they couldn't inherit anything. However, it's the same for you. You're saying the same thing to your father now. Do you realize that? You're being disrespectful and uncivilized. My mother's words left them speechless, forcing them to remain silent. And there was no inheritance to claim. They stood there stunned. What should we do? We built a house and bought a car because we expected an inheritance. How will we sustain ourselves from next month? Last month, we went on a shopping spree using credit, and we still have outstanding loans for the air conditioner and refrigerator we purchased when we moved. My husband and I observed these 60-year-olds panicking due to a lack of funds. I quietly suggested, firstly, it's wrong to rely on money that you're not even sure of receiving. You lack proper planning skills. The two of them seemed too drained to argue with me. Then my brother proposed, let's sell a house. It's the only solution. While it sounded like a sensible idea, my sister-in-law vehemently opposed it. No, that house is my sanctuary. I won't sell it. We finally found a peaceful place to live, and I won't give it up because of this. Oh, if your father doesn't have an inheritance, why not consider sharing your mother's inheritance? Yes, let's do that. It's a good idea, my sister-in-law suggested, approaching my mother. I'm still alive. My mother's response was so comical that I nearly burst out laughing, but I had to hold it in. My brother looked at me. Help me out here. I could almost hear his plea in his expression. At that moment, my husband, a banker, chimed in. Why not consult a financial planner? If you have no income and no savings, you're in a hopeless situation. Selling the house seems appropriate. Fortunately, there's no mortgage, so selling it can bring in some cash for you to live on. Selling the house is the only way to escape this predicament. However, my sister-in-law remained adamant. We won't sell the house. Absolutely not. If that's your stance, then contribute to our living expenses. After all, you're siblings, right? This time, she redirected her attention to us, but my husband skillfully sidestepped the request. It's not feasible. I only invest in ventures with assured returns. My husband's words, shaped by years in the loan department, carried weight. Even if there were potential returns, I wouldn't invest in such a couple. Amidst our discussion, the doctor called. Finally, the moment had arrived. I was mentally prepared for it. When my mother returned from the hospital room, she informed us, "It might not be good news for you. Your father has regained consciousness." She said this while casting a cold stare at my brother and his wife. My husband and I felt a wave of relief at my mother's words, and tears welled in our eyes. My brother and his wife, having realized they would not inherit anything, seemed indifferent to my father's condition. Yet perhaps they were attempting to maintain the facade of concerned children. "Dad, that's great. Yes, you're right." They uttered these insincere words. As my husband and I entered the hospital room after my mother, my brother and his wife trailed behind with seemingly innocent faces. Just before they could enter, my mother halted them. "You two are excused. Your obsession with money sickens me. If you have the time to visit, contemplate your life from tomorrow onwards." She dismissed them like stray dogs and concluded with this remark. "I'll leave you with this message. Thoughts become words. Words become actions. Actions become habits. Habits become character. And character becomes destiny." My brother and his wife were left stunned by my mother's unexpected speech. Huh? In essence, your thoughts ultimately shape your destiny. Unless you alter your thinking, your destiny remains unchanged. Reflect on this carefully. Consider how foolish, unsightly, and pitiable your actions are. With that, my mother firmly shut the door to the hospital room, signaling her determination to break ties with her son. Following that, my brother and his wife were compelled to sell their house. They had to part with their recently constructed home and land for less than a quarter of the $400,000 they initially paid, just 6 months after putting it on the market. This was due to the discovery that the ground in the area was quite unstable, causing land prices to plummet. Moreover, the surplus of houses for sale in the vicinity led to buyers offering very low prices. Despite their reluctance, they had no choice but to sell the house. The unemployed couple now has only a meager amount of cash to sustain them in their old age. It's likely that the funds will deplete before they begin receiving their pension in 5 years. My brother resorts to working as a day laborer for daily wages, while my sister-in-law takes on part-time work. It's a lamentable tale of individuals self-destructing by relying on their parents' inheritance. I hope they grasp the gravity of my mother's words. Surprisingly, there are many stories like this. When people become fixated on money, their judgment often falters. A previous customer of mine once remarked, "When my parents pass away, I'll use the inheritance to pay off my mortgage. So please arrange it for a 20-year term." Such cases are not uncommon. It appears that such situations are prevalent in the world. It's indeed a significant issue. Bankers, dealing with a diverse range of individuals, undoubtedly have a challenging job. There are countless untold stories due to confidentiality. Perhaps I should let my husband take over as the next storyteller. He might have even more fascinating tales to share. Just kidding. How did you find this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Until the next video. I am Evelyn Warner, and the semblance of the life I once knew crumbled on a Thursday evening. Richard, my husband of 15 years, walked through our front door accompanied not only by his presence, but also by a young woman named Clara, barely 23, clinging to his arm. A smirk adorned her face, a stark incongruity in our family home. Without preamble, Richard dropped the bombshell that shattered my world. "I'm divorcing you, Evelyn. Clara will be living here now. This house is hers," he declared, his voice void of the warmth I had come to know. Disbelief and confusion swirled within me, and my heart pounded in my chest. I had heard such stories, but being the protagonist in this cruel plot was beyond my imagination. The calmness enveloping me was more a result of shock than composure. "You can't be serious," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Richard laughed, a sound that now felt foreign. "Oh, I am very serious. It's been a long time coming. You just never saw it." Clara, leaning against him, surveyed me with an air of triumph. "He's tired of you, Evelyn. It's obvious." The scene felt surreal, like a nightmarish scenario. However, the coldness in Richard's eyes was too real. The man I had shared my life with, the father of our child, was now a stranger. "So, this is it. You're throwing away our marriage, our family for her?" I asked, bitterness seeping into my voice. "Family? Please don't be so dramatic. It's not like we were happy. And yes, for Clara. She understands me, unlike you," he retorted. Each word stung, a betrayal echoing in the room. Amidst the pain, clarity began to take hold. Richard was revealing his true, ugly, and callous colors. "You're willing to destroy everything for a fling?" I questioned, my voice steadier now. "Fling? Oh, Evelyn, it's much more than that. Clara is my future, and you? You're just the past," Richard said dismissively. I looked at Clara, a girl young enough to be our daughter, entwined in what she believed was love. I saw it for what it was, a midlife crisis, a cruel game. "Fine," I said, the shock giving way to resolve. "You want divorce? You'll get it. But remember, Richard, this house is as much mine as it is yours, and I won't go down without a fight." As they walked past me, a shiver of disgust coursed through me. It wasn't just the sight of them together. It was the realization of my blindness. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. A beginning of my fight for dignity, for my child, for what was rightfully mine. In the ensuing days, emotions blurred for me. Memories of our life together raced through my mind, now tainted by Richard's betrayal. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, my thoughts consumed by images of him with Clara, their laughter echoing in my ears. Amidst the turmoil, a plan began to take shape. I refused to let Richard walk away unscathed. This wasn't just about a house or a marriage. It was about justice. He would regret his decision, regret ever thinking he could discard me like yesterday's newspaper. Determined, I sought out the best divorce lawyer in town, someone known for their ruthless efficiency. As I explained my situation, Miss Johnson, the lawyer, listened intently, her eyes sharpening with each detail. Richard thinks he can just replace you and walk away with everything. Not on my watch, she said, her tone laced with determination. Together, we pored over the legalities, and it became clear that Richard had underestimated me. The house, which he so arrogantly promised to Clara, was partly mine by law, and the land it stood on, inherited from my father, was solely in my name. Richard had no claim to it whatsoever. Armed with this information, I felt a surge of power for the first time since his betrayal. I was in control, ready to turn the tables on him without him even seeing it coming. Miss Johnson drafted the divorce papers with precision, ensuring my rights were front and center. But it wasn't just about the legal battle, it was personal. Richard had wounded me deeply, and I was going to return the favor. I couldn't wait to see the look on his face when he realized the house he planned to give to his mistress was not his to give. The thought brought a small, satisfied smile to my lips. But this was just the beginning. I was going to hit Richard where it hurt the most. His ego, his pride, his wallet, nothing was off limits. He had started this war, but I was going to finish it. As I signed the divorce papers, I felt a mix of sadness and resolve. The life I had known was over, but a new chapter was beginning. A chapter where I was the author, and Richard was merely a cautionary tale in the story of my life. The day I filed the divorce papers was a turning point. My heart raced with a cocktail of fear and exhilaration as I handed over the documents. This was it, the point of no return. But as I walked out of the courthouse, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was no longer the victim in Richard's cruel play. I was now the protagonist in my own story of justice. Later, I met with Miss Johnson to discuss our next move. We sat in her office, the afternoon sun casting long shadows on the floor as we plotted the downfall of the man I once loved. Richard's going to fight dirty, Evelyn. You need to be prepared for that, Miss Johnson warned, her eyes serious. I know, I replied, steeling myself. But I have something he doesn't know about. The land this house is on. It's mine, inherited from my father. Miss Johnson's eyes lit up. That changes everything. He can't claim the house without the land. We can serve him an eviction notice. The idea of Richard and Clara receiving an eviction notice from the home they thought was theirs brought a bitter sense of satisfaction. It was more than just a legal move, it was a statement. I was not going to be discarded and forgotten. Let's do it, I said firmly. The day the eviction notice was delivered, I imagined the shock and anger on Richard's face. This was just the beginning of his karma. For every tear I shed, for every sleepless night, he would pay. But the battle was far from over. Richard, fueled by his ego, wouldn't go down without a fight. He called me, his voice a mixture of disbelief and fury. Evelyn, what the hell do you think you're doing with this eviction notice? He barked. Just reclaiming what's mine, Richard. You should have thought twice before deciding to give away something that wasn't yours. I replied, my voice calm but firm. This is ridiculous. You're doing this to get back at me, aren't you? He accused. It's not about revenge, Richard. It's about justice. You can't just take what you want without consequences. I countered. Richard was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head. He had underestimated me, thinking I would quietly retreat. But I was fighting back, and I wasn't going to stop until I had what was rightfully mine. "This isn't over, Evelyn. I'll fight this," he finally said. "Go ahead," I responded. "But remember, the law is on my side, and I'm not backing down." After hanging up, I felt a surge of power. For too long, I had let Richard dictate our lives, but now the tables were turned. I was in control, and I would not relent until justice was served. The weeks that followed were a chess game of legal maneuvers and emotional confrontations. Richard, caught off guard by the eviction notice, launched into a series of desperate attempts to sway the situation in his favor. But with each move, he only entangled himself further into the web of his own making. One evening, as I sat in my living room, the phone rang. The caller ID flashed Richard's name, and I braced myself for another round of his pleading and anger. "Evelyn, you can't do this to me, to us." Richard's voice came through, tinged with frustration. "Us? There's no us anymore, Richard. You made sure of that." I replied, my voice steady. "This is madness. You're going to leave me homeless over some petty revenge," he argued. "Petty? You call destroying our family petty." I shot back. "This isn't about revenge, Richard. It's about consequences. Your actions have them, and now you're facing them." Richard's voice turned softer, almost pleading. "Evelyn, please, let's talk about this. We can sort it out for old time's sake." I almost laughed. Old time's sake? As if our years together were mere tokens to be traded in times of trouble. "There's nothing left to sort out, Richard. You made your choices. Now you live with them," I said, cutting him off. He was silent for a moment, and I could sense his desperation mounting. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Seeing me suffer?" he asked. "It's not about enjoyment, Richard. It's about justice. You need to understand that every action has a consequence. And this," I paused, "this is yours." I hung up before he could respond. My heart was racing, but there was a sense of empowerment in standing my ground. For too long, I had let Richard dictate the terms of our life. But now the balance had shifted. I was no longer the passive wife he thought he could easily discard. In the following days, the reality of his situation seemed to dawn on Richard. His calls became less frequent, his voice less assured. The man who had once held all the power in our relationship was now scrambling to salvage what little he could from the ruins he had created. And Clara, her presence in the background of this drama, was a constant reminder of the catalyst for all of this. But I knew her part in Richard's story was coming to an end. She was just another pawn in his game, and soon she would realize it too. I lay awake at night, the silence of the house a stark contrast to the chaos of my thoughts. But amidst the turmoil, there was a growing sense of clarity. I was doing the right thing, not just for myself, but for our child. In this battle of wills, I was not just fighting for my rights, I was fighting for our future. As the legal battle intensified, Richard's veneer of control began to crack. The house he had intended to give Clara was slipping through his fingers, and with it, his imagined future. His desperation became more evident with each passing day. One afternoon, as I reviewed some documents from Miss Johnson, my phone buzzed with a message from Richard. It was an invitation, or rather a plea, for a meeting. Against my better judgment, I agreed. It was time to face him not as his wife, but as the architect of his downfall. We met at a quiet cafe, a neutral ground amidst our war. Richard looked haggard, the strain of the situation etching deep lines on his face. As he saw me, his expression shifted from relief to something darker. "Evelyn, thank you for coming. We need to sort this out," he started, his voice shaky. "Sort this out? You mean find a way for you to weasel out of the consequences?" I replied coldly. He leaned forward, his eyes searching mine. "I know I've made mistakes, but this is too much. You're taking everything from me, everything." "No, Richard. I'm taking back what's mine. You made your choice when you decided to betray our family. Now I'm making mine," I said firmly. Richard's frustration boiled over. "You're heartless. Do you enjoy seeing me like this, struggling, begging?" I met his gaze unflinching. "Heartless? You dare call me heartless after what you've done?" This isn't about enjoyment, Richard. It's about justice. You can beg all you want, but it changes nothing, I said. He slumped back in his chair, defeated. So what? You're going to leave me homeless, ruin me. If that's what it takes for you to understand the gravity of your actions, then yes, I said. You thought you could discard me without any repercussions. You were wrong. Richard looked away, the reality of his situation finally dawning on him. What about Clara? He asked, almost as an afterthought. Clara? She's your concern, not mine. Though I doubt she'll stick around once she realizes there's nothing left for her here, I replied. As I stood up to leave, Richard reached out, a last-ditch effort to salvage something from the wreckage. Evelyn, please. I pulled away. Save your please, Richard. It's too late for that. You've made your bed. Now you lie in it. Walking away from that cafe, I felt a surge of liberation. The chains of our marriage, once so constrictive, were now broken. I was free from Richard's betrayal, free to rebuild my life on my terms. In the wake of our meeting, Richard's attempts to sway the situation became increasingly frantic and futile. His calls, once demanding and arrogant, were now laced with desperation. The tables had turned, and he was slowly coming to terms with the magnitude of his mistakes. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, my phone rang. The familiar jingle brought an involuntary sigh. It was Richard again. Bracing myself, I answered. Evelyn, you can't do this. We can talk about this. There has to be another way, Richard pleaded, his voice cracking. Another way. After everything you've done, you think there's a way out for you. I responded, my voice laced with incredulity. It's not just about me. Think about our child, Evelyn. This affects them too, he argued, playing what he thought was his trump card. Our child? The same child you so easily dismissed in your plans with Clara? No, Richard. This is about justice. This is about making sure our child knows that actions have consequences, I retorted. There was a pause on the other end, a silence filled with unspoken realizations. Richard had always underestimated me, but no longer. I was no longer the woman he thought he could control and manipulate. You're going to regret this, Evelyn. You're pushing me too far, Richard said, his voice a mixture of anger and fear. Regret? The only regret I have is not seeing your true colors sooner. You're not being pushed too far. You're just finally being held accountable, I shot back. Richard's frustration boiled over. You think you've won, don't you? You think you can just take everything and leave me with nothing. This isn't about winning or losing, Richard. It's about righting a wrong. You made your choices, and now you live with the consequences. It's that simple, I replied firmly. The call ended with Richard's defeated silence, a stark contrast to his usual bluster. He was finally feeling the weight of his actions, the cost of his betrayal. In the following weeks, the reality of Richard's situation became increasingly apparent. His financial resources dwindled, strained by legal fees and the loss of the house. Clara, ever the opportunist, began to distance herself, her affection waning as Richard's fortunes declined. The final court hearing was a formality, a legal stamp on what was already a foregone conclusion. As I stood outside the courthouse, the decree in hand, I felt an overwhelming sense of closure. Richard's downfall was complete, a direct result of his own actions. He had sown the seeds of his destruction, and I had merely ensured they grew. Turning my back on the courthouse, my heart lighter than it had been in months, the future lay ahead undefined but promising. I had fought for justice, for myself and my child, and emerged victorious. The months following the divorce and Richard's eviction from the house brought profound changes. Our home, once tainted by the shadow of betrayal, slowly transformed back into a sanctuary of peace and strength for me and our child. Each room was cleansed of Richard's presence, his memories replaced by new joyful ones. Richard's downfall continued in a downward spiral. Without the house and struggling financially, he was forced to move back in with his parents. The last I heard, Clara had left him, her affections as transient as the wealth she had hoped to secure. One day, as I tended to the garden, a task that had become a source of solace. My phone rang. The screen flashed Richard's name, a reminder of a chapter I had firmly closed. Curiosity piqued, I answered. Evelyn, it's Richard. His voice came through subdued and almost unrecognizable. What do you want, Richard? I asked, my tone indifferent. I wanted to apologize for everything, he said, the words seemingly difficult for him to utter. Apologies don't change the past, Richard. They don't undo the hurt, I replied calmly. I know, he admitted. I've lost everything, Evelyn. Clara's gone. I'm living with my parents. I've hit rock bottom. That was your doing, Richard. You made those choices, I stated plainly. There was a heavy sigh on the other end. I know. I thought you should know. I regret it, Evelyn. I regret it all. His words, laden with remorse, didn't bring me the satisfaction I had once thought they would. Instead, there was a sense of finality, a closing of a chapter that had caused so much pain. Your regret is your own to live with, Richard. I've moved on. I suggest you do the same, I said, ready to end the conversation. Evelyn, he started but trailed off. There's nothing more to say, Richard. Goodbye, I said and hung up. As I put my phone away and turned back to my garden, a sense of peace washed over me. The past was behind me, and ahead was a life filled with possibilities, a life of my own making. The garden bloomed around me, a testament to new beginnings and growth. Our child laughed in the background, a sound that filled my heart with joy. This was my world now, one where betrayal and pain had no place. Richard's chapter in my life was over, but mine was just beginning, a chapter filled with strength, resilience, and the love of those who truly mattered. The moment Alex's voice dripped with contempt, my heart plummeted. I stood at the bottom of the stairs in our 2-story house, once a haven of love, now a stage for my humiliation. Yeah, Mom, Emma is really getting on my nerves. Alex's voice echoed down the stairs, tinged with annoyance. She thinks she's the boss just because she's the main breadwinner now. It's laughable. I gripped the banister, knuckles whitening. This wasn't the first time I felt dismissed by Alex, but hearing him belittle me to his mother Helen was a new low. I'm right. She's so full of herself lately, crackled Helen's voice through the phone speaker. You should show her she's not irreplaceable. Maybe meet someone younger, more fun. A cold laugh escaped Alex. That might just teach her a lesson. Emma's so smitten with me, she wouldn't dare leave, no matter what. Their words cut through me like shards of glass. 7 years of marriage reduced to this mockery. I was Emma, a 32-year-old marketing executive, shouldering most of our expenses since Alex quit his job. And here he was, plotting betrayal with the same nonchalance as discussing the weather. I stepped back, retreating into the shadows, my mind racing. The loving, attentive man I married had transformed into a callous stranger. But I refused to be his doormat. A fiery resolve ignited within me. I wouldn't just walk away defeated. I would make Alex regret every scornful word he had uttered. For years, I had ignored the subtle jabs, the gradual distancing, and the financial leeching. But no more. As I stood there, a plan began to take shape in my mind, a plan to reclaim my life, my dignity. I waited until Alex ended the call and came downstairs, his face morphing into a mask of faint affection as he saw me. Hey, honey, he said, planting a hollow kiss on my cheek. How was your day? His casual demeanor was a slap in the face. It was fine, Alex, I replied, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside. I just need to rest. It's been a long day. He shrugged, oblivious to the seismic shift happening right in front of him. Sure, I'll be watching the game. Don't wait up, he said as he lounged on the sofa, remote in hand. I retreated to our bedroom, but I wasn't there to cry or lament. I was strategizing my escape, my revenge. Alex had underestimated me for the last time. I picked up my phone and began to make a list of everything I needed to do to untangle my life from his. I would start tomorrow. No more being the oblivious, accommodating wife. It was time for Emma to take center stage in her own story. The days that followed were a masterclass in deception. I, Emma, kept up appearances, playing the role of the dutiful wife while plotting my departure. Alex, wrapped up in his arrogance, noticed nothing. One evening, as we sat across from each other at dinner, the silence was suffocating. He scrolled through his phone, chuckling occasionally. I pushed my food around my plate, my mind elsewhere. "Alex, remember when we used to talk during dinner?" I asked, a hint of nostalgia in my voice. He glanced up, eyes narrow. "What's there to talk about? It's not like you're interested in my day." His dismissive tone stung. "I am interested, Alex. I always have been," I replied calmly, though his words cut deep. "Right, just like you're interested in my career choices," he scoffed. But I didn't let it show. I remained steadfast, determined to see my plan through to the end. I clenched my fists under the table. "I supported your decision to quit your job, Alex. I just didn't expect to become the only one working." Alex laughed, a cold and harsh sound. "Oh, come on, Emma. You love being the martyr, don't you? The hard-working wife supporting her lazy husband." The accusation was ludicrous, yet it revealed his twisted perception of our marriage. "I never saw it that way, Alex, but I can't deny feeling alone in this relationship," I confessed. His expression hardened. "Maybe you should find someone who can give you what you need. I'm clearly not enough." The words were a slap in the face, but they fueled my resolve. I was done being the victim in this twisted game. As the days passed, I began moving my personal belongings out of the house, discreetly opening a separate bank account, and redirecting my salary there. Every step was calculated. One night, as I lay in bed next to Alex, his snoring a constant reminder of our fractured union, I whispered to myself, "Not for much longer." I rose early the next day, my heart heavy but determined. As I was leaving for work, Alex called out from the kitchen, his tone unusually soft. "Emma, wait. Are we okay?" I paused at the door, my back to him. "We're fine, Alex. Just the usual stress." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but it was necessary. I couldn't tip him off, not when I was so close to breaking free. That day at work, I made the final arrangements, contacting a realtor and inquiring about a small apartment in a quiet part of town. A fresh start, a clean slate. I came home to find Alex sprawled on the sofa with a beer in hand. "You're late," he remarked, his tone accusatory. I shrugged off my coat, keeping my face neutral. Work was hectic. "You know how it is," he snorted. "Yeah, right, busy being the big shot at the office." I ignored the jab, heading to the kitchen to prepare dinner. As I chopped vegetables, my mind wandered to the life awaiting me. A life free from Alex's scorn and selfishness, where I was no longer invisible or insignificant. We ate dinner in silence, each bite savored as the facade crumbled. After dinner, as Alex lounged in front of the TV, I retreated to our bedroom. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, the room once filled with laughter and love now feeling like a prison. But not for much longer. My plan was in motion, and there was no turning back. The next chapter of my life was about to begin, and I was ready. The days turned into weeks, each passing moment a step closer to my emancipation. My facade as the complacent wife remained flawless, even as my plans to leave Alex grew more concrete. He remained ensconced in his bubble of egotism, suspecting nothing. One Tuesday evening, I arrived home later than usual, exhausted from a demanding day at work. Alex was in the living room, a picture of leisure, absorbed in a video game. The sight irked me, a stark contrast to my own weary state. "Alex, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the fatigue. He paused his game, looking up with an expression of feigned concern. "What's up, Emma?" I took a deep breath, ready to confront him about the financial strain he had put on our marriage. "I saw the credit card statement today. There's a charge of over $5,000, Alex. What did you buy?" His face paled momentarily. Then he shrugged nonchalantly. "Just some stuff I needed. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal?" My voice rose in disbelief. "Alex, you used my credit card without asking, and for such an amount. He rolled his eyes, dismissing my anger. Come on, Emma, it's not like we can't afford it. Besides, I'm your husband. What's yours is mine, right? The audacity of his words left me speechless. This was not just disrespect, it was outright theft. My patience, already hanging by a thread, snapped. This is unacceptable, Alex, I exclaimed, my voice echoing through the room. You can't just use my money without my consent. This is financial abuse. Alex stood up, his demeanor shifting from dismissive to aggressive. Oh, so now I'm an abuser? Great. I can't even buy a few things without getting lectured. You're so controlling, Emma. His attempt to turn the tables on me was pathetic. Controlling? I'm trying to have a responsible conversation about our finances, which you seem to have no respect for, I shot back. He scoffed, crossing his arms. You know what, Emma? I don't need this. I'm going out. With that, he grabbed his jacket and stormed out, leaving me alone in the midst of our shattered illusion of a happy marriage. I sank onto the couch, my mind racing. This confrontation was the last straw. Alex's complete disregard for our financial stability, combined with his entitlement and lack of remorse, solidified my decision to leave. But it wasn't enough to just walk away. Alex needed to learn a lesson, to understand the consequences of his actions. My plan for revenge began to take a more defined shape over the next few days. I'd acted as if nothing had happened, while internally, I was a whirlwind of activity. I documented all instances of Alex's financial irresponsibility, gathering evidence for the impending legal battle. Meanwhile, Alex continued his charade of normalcy, oblivious to the storm brewing. He returned to his lazy routines, occasionally throwing a snide comment my way. But I was no longer the Emma who took his insults lying down. With each passing day, my resolve grew stronger. I was ready to reclaim my life and teach Alex a lesson he would never forget. Weeks slipped by, and the facade of our marriage continued, a thin veil over the growing chasm between Alex and me. My plans, however, were solidifying, each step meticulously calculated. It was a waiting game, a game where I held all the cards. Determined to win back control, I found Alex lounging on the couch one lazy Sunday afternoon, his attention fixed on a football match. With rehearsed casualness, I approached him, suggesting, Alex, have you thought about looking for a job? It might help with our finances. His barely interested response stung, but I pressed on, emphasizing the importance of contribution and teamwork. His snort and dismissive attitude pierced through, reminding me of his lack of respect for our partnership. Nodding in agreement, I hid my frustration, concealing the cold resolve brewing within me. In the following days, I engaged in silent preparations, secret meetings with a lawyer, documenting Alex's financial irresponsibility, neglect, and emotional abuse filled my time. Meanwhile, Alex remained oblivious, indulging in idle leisure, throwing occasional barbs my way, believing I was too weak to fight back. Little did he know, each jab only fueled my determination to break free from his complacency. During a dinner, as Alex's phone buzzed incessantly with plans for a night out, I feigned indifference, masking my anticipation for the opportunity ahead. As he left for his carefree evening, I sprang into action, packing my essentials and arranging for the movers to execute my escape to a new apartment, a sanctuary from the life I was leaving behind. That night, lying in our bed for the last time, I embraced a mix of fear, excitement, and relief, knowing that the quiet before the storm marked the end of an old life and the dawn of a new one. The next morning, as I prepared to confront Alex, a mix of dread and determination filled me. His late, alcohol-laden arrival, without so much as a greeting, only solidified my resolve to break free from his manipulative grasp. I sealed myself and walked into the living room where Alex was slouched, clearly hungover. Alex, we need to talk, I said firmly, my voice cutting through the silence. He squinted at me, clearly annoyed. What now, Emma? Can it wait? I'm exhausted. No, it can't wait, I replied, my resolve hardening. It's about our marriage or what's left of it. He scoffed, rubbing his temples. What about our marriage? You're not happy with me lounging around the house. It's more than that, Alex, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. It's about respect, partnership, and trust, all of which have been absent for too long. Alex sat up, a smirk forming on his face. Oh, here we go, the great Emma, always so perfect and judgmental. What's your point? I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the truth I was about to unleash. My point, Alex, is that I'm done. I'm leaving you. His expression shifted from disdain to disbelief. Leaving me? You're joking, right? I shook my head, a sense of liberation washing over me. No joke, Alex. I can't live like this anymore. I refuse to be treated as an afterthought, a bank account for your whims. Alex's face turned a mix of anger and wounded pride. You can't leave me, Emma. You think you can do better? You think you'll find someone who will put up with your controlling ways. His words were a desperate attempt to regain control, but they fell flat. It's not about finding someone else, Alex. It's about finding myself, something I'd lost the day I started letting you walk all over me. He stood up, towering over me, his voice laced with venom. Fine, leave. See if I care. You'll come crawling back, you'll see. I met his gaze, my own eyes unwavering. I won't be crawling back, Alex. This is goodbye. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing in stunned silence. My heart raced with a cocktail of emotions, fear, relief, exhilaration. I was finally taking control of my life. The movers arrived, and I supervised the removal of my belongings, each item a piece of the new life I was building. Alex watched from the doorway, his face a mask of shock and resentment. As the last box was loaded into the van, I turned to face him one last time. Goodbye, Alex. I wish you all the best. His eyes burned with a mix of anger and disbelief, but he said nothing. I climbed into the van, not looking back as we drove away from the house, the life, and the man I was leaving behind. The sense of freedom was overwhelming. I was embarking on a new journey, one where I was the author of my own story. As the van pulled up to my new apartment, a small, modest space filled with potential, I stepped out into my new world. A world where I was no longer Emma, the neglected wife, but Emma, the woman who reclaimed her life. Settling into my new apartment felt like taking a deep breath after being submerged underwater for too long. The freedom was exhilarating, yet the looming confrontation with Alex cast a shadow over my newfound independence. Several days passed in a blur of adjustment and anticipation, and then the inevitable happened. Alex's number flashed on my phone. I sealed myself and answered. Emma, where the hell are you? You think you can just leave like that? His voice was a mix of rage and disbelief. I already told you, Alex, I replied calmly. I'm done. Our marriage is over. He couldn't accept it. You can't just decide that on your own. You're my wife. His anger was palpable. Was your wife, Alex? I corrected him firmly. And yes, I can decide. I won't be a part of a marriage where I'm disrespected and used, I countered, my voice firm. There was a pause, and I could almost hear the cogs turning in his head. You'll come back. You need me, he asserted. I couldn't help but laugh, genuine amusement coloring the sound. Need you, Alex? I've been the one carrying us for years. I don't need you. It's the other way around. His voice cracked with a mixture of fury and desperation. You can't do this to me, Emma. What about our finances, the house? You can't just leave me with nothing. I retorted firmly. That's not my concern anymore, Alex. You should have thought about that before treating me the way you did. The satisfaction of finally speaking my mind was liberating. There was silence on the other end, and then he hung up. I stared at the phone, a sense of finality washing over me. I had closed the chapter on Alex, but I knew this wasn't the end. There would be legal battles ahead, but I was ready for them. I was fighting for myself now. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal consultations and paperwork. I filed for divorce, citing Alex's financial irresponsibility and emotional neglect. He responded with a barrage of angry calls and messages, each one more desperate and vindictive than the last. You'll regret this, Emma. You can't just throw me out like garbage. he yelled during one particularly heated call. I remained unmoved. "I'm not throwing you out, Alex. I'm setting myself free. And as for regret, I'd only regret not doing this sooner." As the legal proceedings progressed, Alex's true colors shone brighter than ever. He tried to manipulate the situation, paint himself as the victim, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. The day of the final hearing arrived, and I stood in the courtroom, a mix of nerves and determination. Alex was there, his face a mask of defiance and resentment. The judge reviewed our case, the documentation of Alex's financial abuse, and my testimony of our marriage's breakdown. The verdict was swift and in my favor. I was granted a divorce and a fair settlement. Alex's face contorted with rage as the judge announced the decision. His protests fell on deaf ears. The decision was final. I walked out of that courtroom feeling lighter than I had in years. I had won, not just the case, but my freedom. As I started my car and drove away from the courthouse, I didn't look back. Alex was a part of my past now, a reminder of what I had overcome. Ahead of me lay a road of possibilities, a future where I was in control. A sense of peace settled over me. The battle was over, and I had emerged victorious. The days following the divorce were a mix of relief and rebuilding. I, Emma, had stood up for myself in a way I never thought possible. Yet the echoes of my broken marriage with Alex lingered, a reminder of the battles I had fought. I was settling into my new life, embracing the peace that came with it when my phone rang one evening. The screen flashed Alex's name, a ghost from the past I thought I had left behind. Reluctantly, I answered. "Alex, why are you calling?" His voice came through, laced with bitterness. "You think you can just take everything from me and walk away, Emma? You've ruined my life." I took a deep breath, keeping my composure. "Alex, the court made its decision. It's time for both of us to move on." He scoffed. "Move on? How can I move on when you've left me with nothing?" "I'm struggling to make ends meet because of you." The accusation was absurd, yet it didn't surprise me. "You're responsible for your own situation, Alex. I simply stopped enabling your behavior." My voice rose, tinged with desperation and anger. "You owe me, Emma. After everything I did for you, you owe me." Alex's voice came through, laced with bitterness. I felt a twinge of anger but kept it at bay. "You did nothing but take me for granted, Alex." "I don't owe you anything," I retorted firmly. There was a pause. Then his voice came through quieter but still venomous. "You'll pay for this, Emma. You haven't seen the last of me." I ended the call, a sense of unease settling over me. Alex's threats were likely empty, but they were a reminder of the man I had once loved, now a stranger consumed by bitterness. The weeks passed, and I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the routine. My colleagues noticed the change in me, the newfound confidence and determination. I was promoted, a recognition of my hard work and resilience. But as I climbed the corporate ladder, Alex's shadow loomed. He started a smear campaign, spreading lies and rumors about me to our mutual acquaintances. I heard whispers of his accusations, painting me as the heartless ex-wife who had stripped him of everything. I confronted these challenges head-on, refusing to let Alex's pettiness derail my progress. I had fought too hard to reclaim my life to let his bitterness taint it. One afternoon, I received a call from a mutual friend, hesitantly relaying a message from Alex. He was struggling financially, facing eviction, and in a moment of desperation, he reached out to me. I listened, a mix of pity and resolve in my heart. "Tell Alex I wish him well, but his choices are his own. I can't help him," I said as I hung up. I realized how far I had come. The old Emma might have rushed to Alex's aid, but I was no longer that person. I had learned the hard way that you can't help someone who refuses to help themselves. I continued to build my life, finding joy in the little things. I reconnected with old friends, explored new hobbies, and started dating again. Life was moving forward, and I was at the helm. Alex's attempts to drag me down continued, but they no longer held power over me. I had risen from the ashes of our marriage, stronger and more determined than ever. As I sat in my apartment one evening, reflecting on my journey, I felt a sense of peace. I had faced my demons, fought my battles, and emerged victorious. The future was bright, and for the first time in a long time, I was genuinely excited for what lay ahead. Life had a way of settling into a new rhythm, and mine was no different. The scars of my past with Alex were there, but they no longer defined me. I was Emma, reborn from the ashes of a life I had left behind. My promotion at work had brought new challenges and opportunities. I thrived in the environment, my confidence bolstering with each successful project. My social life, too, had taken a positive turn. I met new people, some of whom became close friends, and even started dating again. Life was good, but the shadow of Alex still lingered at the edge of my newfound happiness. One evening, while having dinner with a friend, my phone buzzed. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize. Hesitantly, I opened it. It was from Alex. "Emma, I need your help. Please." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of our shared history. I showed the message to my friend, who looked at me with concern. "You don't know him anything, Emma. Remember that," she said. I knew she was right. I had moved on, but it seemed Alex was still stuck in the past. I didn't reply to the message. Instead, I blocked the number and tried to focus on the present. The next day, I heard the news. Alex had hit rock bottom. He had lost his home, his friends, and was struggling to find work. Part of me felt pity for him, but another part knew this was the result of his own actions. I continued with my life, the memory of Alex fading into the background. My days were filled with work, friends, and the occasional date. Life was moving forward, and I was content. A few weeks later, I bumped into a mutual acquaintance who had kept in touch with Alex. "He's not doing well, Emma," she said, her expression somber. "He's lost everything. He's even talking about leaving town." I listened, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Alex had been a significant part of my life, but he had also been the source of much pain. His downfall was his own doing, a result of his choices and actions. "He made his bed," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. "I hope he finds what he's looking for." As I walked away, I realized that Alex's downfall was his own karma. He had chosen his path, and now he was facing the consequences. It was a harsh reality, but it was not mine to bear. Months passed, and life continued. I read snippets of Alex's situation now and then, but they no longer affected me. I had moved on, building a life that was mine and mine alone. One day, as I sat in my office looking out at the city skyline, I reflected on my journey. I had faced adversity, fought for my dignity, and emerged stronger. I had learned to stand up for myself, to demand respect, and to walk away from toxicity. I had also learned to forgive, not for the sake of those who had wronged me, but for my own peace. Holding on to anger and resentment only weighed me down. I had let go, and in doing so, I had found freedom. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the city, I smiled. I was happy, truly happy. My past with Alex was just that, the past. Ahead of me lay a future full of possibilities, a future